All right. So you think we should get started?
I think so. Yeah, people will probably keep trickling in, but I'm just going to launch our entry poll now. Just a few questions about what brought you here. If you have a chance to fill that over the next few minutes, I'll leave it open for a little bit. But yeah, otherwise, I think we're good to go.
Okay. Let's see. Thinking if there's anything else I wanted to look up of our stats, but no, we can get into that. Yeah, welcome everyone. I guess should we do introductions? I'm not sure if you already said hello, Mark.
Not really.
Yes, welcome. My name's Andrew. I'm a longtime instructor at KTBYTE, and I teach a lot of the advanced classes. Today we're going to talk about competitions, so that certainly includes classes at all kinds of levels of computer science ability. But I teach some of the upper level ones, including a lot of the USA Computing Olympiad classes. And then Mark, do you want to say hello?
Sure. Yeah, I'm also an instructor at KTBYTE and our operations manager. So I kind of split my time between teaching classes and curriculum development, and also doing some of the scheduling and managing our customer service team, which is probably mostly how you interact with us.
All right, and we're here to talk about the competition season, which is something we like to talk about throughout the year. It's it's an area of interest to a lot of people, but this is the time of year where we're starting to wrap things up, or have already wrapped up a lot of the computer science contests available for most students. So part of this will be to review overall what things are all about, also to tell you some of the new things we did this year and how that's going to affect how we approach preparing and offering these contests for the next year, and maybe some things to think about as students get close to summer and start thinking about the next season of competitions. So let's see. We have a little list here. Just, we're going to talk about primarily these competitions. Maybe it's a little small text, but we're sort of dividing these into a few categories. We have the ones that you might have heard of us talking about before, which is ACSL, which stands for American Computer Science League, and USACO, which is the USA Computing Olympiad. There are also some new competitions we've been able to offer in the past year that we never did before. We've mentioned these and talked about them a little bit, but this is sort of the first follow-up session about how those have been going and what we plan to do in the future. So that would be well, two of the ones that we've already offered this year are two Canadian competitions called the Beaver Computing Competition, which is intended for slightly younger students, and the Canadian Computing Competition, which is basically the Canadian equivalent to USACO. And then we also have a similar competition coming up that we're hoping to be able to offer this summer, although registration hasn't opened yet. So we still have some details to figure out and learn about, but that would be the Australian Informatics Olympiad. So there are some similarities as well as differences between all of these options, and we'll try to clarify those things for you. We'll talk about how they're all organized, what kind of things you should keep in mind for scheduling, what kind of topics are covered, what some general things to keep in mind about them are, and how do our KTBYTE classes relate to the topics that you'd see here. So let's start with the two that you've probably heard us talk about before, and I call these long-term competitions. Maybe not the best term, because I guess what I mean by that is that they meet 4 times per year, or that there are 4 events per year. So it's something you want to plan to do and be an ongoing activity over the course of the year. That's what I mean by long term. All of the competitions we've been talking about are offered annually, so we plan to keep encouraging students to participate them every year. But this is something you can do multiple times per year, both of these. So ACSL is American Computer Science League. It's grades 3 through 12 at various divisions, and we'll see a little bit more about how the difficulty levels work in a little bit later. It's a mix of short answer and programming tasks. So in a way, it's one of the most well-rounded competitions. It's not just about your pure programming ability. You can also learn about specific computer science theoretical topics, use a little bit of logical thinking skills and mathematical skills, rather than just program things to solve problems. It's a little bit more accessible, or maybe a lot more accessible than something like the USA Computing Olympiad, because it's designed to be taken for students as young as 3rd grade, possibly even earlier. It has an elementary level division and continues all the way up through more advanced work. Much like a lot of these competitions, it is organized by registering for a team. We're going to see that a few more times with the others. So even though you mostly do individual work, with the one exception of the possible end of year all-star competition where you might actually work as a team at this live event that some teams get invited to. But for the most part, it's individual work, other than, of course, your practice. Everybody can practice together, take classes on these topics and learn from each other. Yeah, that's ACSL programming in short answer, organized through a team, but working for yourself and trying to learn about a variety of things. USA Computing Olympiad is definitely intended for high school students. It's probably the most difficult of all the contests we're talking about today. It is completely programming tasks, although there's often a lot of logic and planning you have to do before you start programming. So it is important to still be well-rounded, but the task only takes one form. So you have to get good at that form. It is quite challenging, and it's also a little less predictable just because they're constantly pushing the difficulty to the limit with this competition, especially in the past few years. It's hard to always say exactly how hard it'll be. We've seen problems from the past few semesters or for the past few events where students are surprised that it wasn't as hard as they thought, but then others where it was very difficult. So you have to just take your time with it, not necessarily expect immediate success, and sort of enjoy the variety of things you'll see. This is the one contest that is completely individual, even though, again, we can train and take classes together. You register on the USACO website just as an individual participant and participate on it on your own. There's no coordination through the school. So keep that in mind. Please get to know the USACO website. And if you take our classes as a student, ask about the things you want to ask about, because you won't have a chance to ask about those things during the live event. It's not permitted for us to help you with that. Whereas with the others, maybe we have more direct involvement with taking the competition. So that's the overview. We're going to talk about a few more details with some of these shortly. Let me take a look at the other competitions, just the major bullet points here. So the Canadian Computing Challenge, actually can't remember if it's called challenge or competition, but in any case, it is the CCC, and this is the Canadian equivalent of the USA Computing Olympiad. Now, I guess since we're starting to talk about different countries, I should say that all of these national labels, they don't really matter all that much. You are allowed to participate in all of these as long as you register through a school, and we have registered as a participating school with the Canadian competition system as well as the Australian system, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes as well. So these are all just different, slightly different opportunities to try to do well at this, maybe get a slightly different difficulty level than you might have with another country. There are certain restrictions if you're at the absolute top tier, like Olympic level performance with these kind of things, where you wouldn't be on the Canadian national team if you don't actually go to school in Canada and so on. But that's not the major concern for most students. The main thing is, getting that recognition and having a chance to just participate in these events, which you can absolutely do regardless what country you live in or what country KTBYTE is in. So this, just like the USA Computing Olympiad, is for mostly high school students. It is also all programming. In fact, both of these competitions, USACO and CCC, are intended to technically train for this international competition called the IOI, the International Olympiad in Informatics, which is sort of a synonym for computer science. Many nations in the world have these competitions, but of course we're focusing on the English language ones. This is just, again, another opportunity to get used to that, even though the way different nations organize their training program and this sort of qualification competition series is a little bit different. So basically just more opportunity to get access to this stuff. The CCC is definitely easier to get started. If you look at some of the earlier problems in the lowest division of the CCC, you'll find they're much easier than USACO introductory problems are. So that's actually really nice. It means that fairly young students, maybe middle school students who are just starting to get to a high school level of understanding of technical programming, they can certainly have a really good shot at doing well with at least several problems on the CCC and start to get used to this overall style of contest. Now, both the Canadian competitions, the CCC and the BCC, are organized by the CEMC, which is this, oh no, I'm going to forget this one. It is a Center for mathematics and computing excellence or something like that. It's a great, I apologize to any CEMC fans here for forgetting the full name, but it is a great program that offers all kinds of competitions, including a lot of math competitions in Canada. But yeah, computer science competitions offered through there, and their website is, where you get access to the problems, and they've got a great, practice system that you can use. So this contest is offered every year in February, which means we're a few months after we offered it for the very first time. And we'll talk a little bit more later about, what that was like and how it went. This year it was in person. So unfortunately, that meant that only people who were relatively close to us in our Lexington office in Massachusetts, or possibly our Hong Kong satellite office, were able to do that. We're in the previous years, especially during the pandemic, they offered it online, which is where most of these competitions are offered. We're certainly hopeful that there will be more flexible ways to do this, but we'll go with what we need to go with. It certainly was a fun event to run in person this year. Now, just like ACSL, this is organized through a team, but the work you actually do during the actual competition event is individual. So this was our first year participating. We actually were quite pleased seeing a lot of students do fairly well, get recognition for that, and we plan to continue participating in it. So we also have these other two that are in some ways similar to the CCC. The Beaver Computing Challenge is actually maybe the one that is most different, because it's offered by the same organization, the CEMC, but it was offered online this year, and it's just a little bit different from the others. It's all short answer problems, and it's much more focused on logical thinking and sort of word puzzle solving. It's multiple choice. There's no programming. So it's a little bit of a different style, but it certainly is training on computer science skills and computer science thinking. Because there's no programming, there's less of a barrier to entry. So quite young students can do this. Technically, they say, 5th and 6th grade is what it's suggested for students to be when they get started. But we've certainly seen students as young as, 2nd or 3rd grade, maybe even younger, do quite well, or at least enjoy the process of trying to solve these kinds of problems. So we had a few students participate this year, and we plan to keep offering this one as well. Once again, it's individual work, and you have to register as a team. Then finally, we have the Australian Informatics Olympiad. We actually don't have complete information on this because we haven't had an opportunity to have students participate in this one yet. It's offered during August, so we're looking forward in a few months to allowing more advanced students to do this. Overall, looking at sort of the practice materials and the way it's set up, it's very similar to CCC, but it is the Australian competition. So once again, it's technically feeding into this international competition, but that's really for the very highest levels of competitors in each country. You don't really need to think too much about that. The point is they're all similar style. So that's a really nice thing, because it means preparing for one of them helps you prepare for the others as well. So yeah, looking forward to doing that this summer. So that's kind of the overview, and we'll look at a few more details that you might be wondering about with these. Maybe I'll take a quick glance and see if there's any questions I can answer right away. Some of them we might be talking about coming up soon. So in terms of, multiple of these are organized through schools. Mostly what that means is registering for the competition. You have to go through a registered school to sort of validate you and say you're a real person, that kind of thing. So we are registered for the AIO, the Australian competition, the CCC, and the BCC, which are the Canadian competitions, as well as multiple school teams for ACSL. So basically, that just gives you access to these. Now, sometimes there might be restrictions about, for instance, if your home high school or middle school has an ACSL team, you would actually be required to register there. But many schools do not have that team, so we are happy to be able to offer that opportunity for everybody. In terms of like the actual team nature of it, you should and can practice together as a team, and we have classes and clubs to do that kind of thing. Although technically you could really do your own work. So most of the work is individualized, even though they call it a team. ACSL also does like a ranking of schools by, the total score of their top 5 students per team, that kind of thing. It's honestly not something that individual students need to worry too much about, although we are certainly proud when we see that our teams are doing well. All of these that I've mentioned so far are online, other than the CCC. Even the CCC has been online, and we're sort of crossing our fingers they might allow an online option in the future, but most of them are online. And In terms of age ranges, there are some age cutoffs for certain divisions of ACSL, and there is an age and grade cutoff for the BCC. BCC is sort of, it's definitely logical thinking and good computer science skills, but at a certain point, like once you're at a certain point in your high school education or overall computer science learning, you really should be pushing yourself to express that logical thinking in actual programming rather than just answering multiple choice. So there is a cutoff for that. Overall, BCC says it goes to grade 10, but honestly, I think many of our students who are in grade 10 would actually find it quite easy. So it just makes sense to move on to that. So I believe next time the BCC is offered will be next school year. So that would be the year or the grade level to think about for BCC participation. Okay, so yeah, some of these I also might want to double check, but that's the kind of overview of that. So I'll move on a little bit. Let's talk about classes actually before we get into the individual details of the competitions. We do have a variety of different activities and content in our classes to help train for these things. Now, one thing I should point out is that overall computer science thinking is always helpful for any of these. So if you just take our core classes and you don't even think about a specific competition, and then you decide, you see in a newsletter, oh, it's coming up next month, yeah, you can give it a shot. Now, with that said, it is good to take a look at just the format of the competition, but you don't need specialized training to just get started with these, but certainly to do well, it is helpful to practice on the specific kind of material you'll be seeing. So for the ACSL competition, we organize these as clubs where we have experienced teaching assistants or other staff members in fact, yeah, sorry, not even teaching assistants. We have teachers teaching this who are quite experienced with ACSL to lead presenting the content. With that said, it's more of a club style class, if that makes sense, because we're really just doing a lot of practice. There's not necessarily really long form progression of getting deeper and deeper into computer science the way that our core classes progress. Instead, ACSL has specific topics you need to kind of have an overview of to get started on doing the short answer problems, and a general good understanding of programming to do the programming tasks. And after that, you just want to practice lots of problems of those types. So it's a little bit more flexible. For instance, you could probably miss a couple lessons here and there with the ACSL club, and you might not really need to make that up specifically as long as you just continue to practice those problems. So it's definitely a little bit of a different feeling than a progressive curriculum like our core curriculum is for overall computer science progression. So like I mentioned, you would enroll for a team, and you do have to enroll for the KTBYTE team. We're not allowed to share our practice materials, which ACSL has licensing and so on for. We're not allowed to practice with those materials unless you're on our team. But if you are on our team, you could practice independently, but we certainly recommend participating with our club, getting the benefit of other students discussing these things, and an experienced teacher to help present and lead students through their practice. BCC style problems, like I said, are a little different. There's not really one problem format. It's more general logical thinking skills. So we really like this kind of thing, but it is a little harder to know exactly how to prepare for it. Part of it is just take programming classes and other computer science classes and other, really any kind of STEM classes that have some sort of technical thinking and logical thinking. But we also have a couple forms of questions like the BCC in our classwork that we do at least once per semester for the younger age core classes. And some of you may have seen our KTBYTE challenge, which is a set of multiple choice problems with all kind of logic problems, much like the BCC problems are. And we've actually just started this past semester offering actual Beaver Computing Challenge problems into our core classwork. Now, to be honest, a lot of students found that they were fairly easy and got through those problems quite quickly. So we're certainly going to be adding even more of those problems going forward so students can get lots of practice in their actual core classes. It's the kind of thing where you probably don't really need to take a whole preparation class because the nature of the problems is more general thinking than something like ACSL or USACO. But with that said, there are other practice problems available that we're going to keep making accessible for everyone. For all these, the three contests, they're all IOI style contests, which again is the international contest. So that'd be USACO, CCC, and AOIO. We've always had a pretty good, or quite good, I would say, but I guess you can be the judge, USACO curriculum that we've seen lots of good success for our students, leading them through the difficulty levels of the contest. And so we are sort of building on that and have been building on that this past school year. The nice thing is, even though we've organized these classes around USACO, those skills you're learning there are exactly the same skills that are going to get you far in the other competitions as well. So we actually find that because USACO has a nice 4-level division system, it's a little bit easier to understand what difficulty you're at if you focus on the USACO divisions, whereas the other ones have more variations. So we call our USACO classes bronze, silver, and gold level classes. But yeah, the bronze class would be good preparation for planning to participate in the AIO as well. So our recent change we've made is making these a 2-semester class series at each level rather than 1 semester that we used to have. Overall, USACO is getting more difficult over the past few years, and this ensures that all students get recommended to really put in the practice that they need to have a wide variety of problems that they've seen and applied certain ideas in multiple different ways. That's what we recommend, basically a 2-course sequence for each USACO difficulty division that you want to work through, plus, of course, just even more general practice that you would do on your own as well. And again, this overlaps a lot. Now, the intro bronze class is helpful for getting used to this style of competition. One thing we're considering adding in the future is possibly a class to train for the easier CCC or AIO problems, because they do start at an earlier difficulty level than you would see with the USACO competition. So we're not totally sure if there's enough demand for that, or if possibly our other core classes might really just be fine for sort of getting that beginning of the start, and then you would go into USACO classes from there. If that's something you'd be interested in seeing, a easier than USACO competition training class, let us know about it. We're always kind of looking out for what would be most helpful for our parents and our students. So let's talk about ACSL. This is organized with 4 contests per year. The way they've been doing this ever since the pandemic started is that you have a very wide window at these 4 periods during the year, and they actually overlap, where you can do the contest. The programming portion of the contest is done over a 72-hour period, so it's not a very tight time limit. It's usually something someone would choose to do over some weekend. And then the short answer competition is timed a lot shorter. You have to answer, I believe, 5 problems sort of on paper, although it is done through an online format. You have to do that in, I believe, half an hour or an hour. I think half an hour. There's a wide window when you can choose to do that, but once you choose to do it, you do it in that time period, and then you're done with one of these 4 contests per year. Then there's an end-of-year contest as well, which is an individual invitational finals competition that if you scored very well, you can be invited to. And then traditionally there's an all-star contest, although that's sort of varied a little bit over the past few years when it's been difficult to have, live in-person events because of the pandemic. But that's the idea. So if the window idea is confusing, an example would be the first contest of the year. A student could maybe choose to do that anytime from October through December. But then the second contest of the year, they might actually also be able to do that in December, but they could wait as late as February to do that one. And those are just examples, but the kind of an overlapping window where you could choose to do it. Now, because it is important to practice for this, and we do have our clubs that meet to prepare for this, we certainly don't recommend students immediately take the contest as soon as they can. It's better to allow your club to do a lot of practice problems with you and talk through any questions you have. But it is pretty flexible about how you do it. You do have to enroll through the through KTBYTE or a school that you go to in person, and then you do have the individual finals invitation. And the work itself is still individual. One thing I guess I could mention about the schedule is your work over these 4 contests during the year is cumulative and also has slightly different topics each time. So you need to plan to participate in all 4 of them if you want to really get any recognition of how well you did at the end of the year. If you miss one, you're basically missing 1/4 of the credit for the work that you could have done, and you're not going to be, at that top tier of competition in your division. So it is a mix of short answer problems that are timed in a fairly short period, and then some general programming problems. The format hasn't really changed very much in the decades that they've been doing this. So it's pretty reliable, pretty nice, reliable contest to do, where once you've seen how it works, you can kind of assume you'll be able to keep doing it and have some form of success at it, all the way up through your senior year of high school, for instance. If your school doesn't organize ACSL, absolutely, yeah, that's exactly when you would enroll through the KTBYTE team, and you can do that from anywhere you are. You don't have to be in the United States or anything like that. So yeah, that is ACSL, a cumulative 4 event per year plus a bonus event competition with a variety of different topics and formats. Let's see. So to talk about the divisions for a second, in case anyone is new to ACSL, these are the 4 divisions. Elementary division is a little bit different from the others. It doesn't have a programming portion. So the fact is, once maybe a middle school student might be in 6th or 7th grade and has learned to do some programming in Java through our classes, you could actually just do the junior division of competition at that point. But yeah, technically you can do elementary division up through 6th grade, I believe. And you wouldn't have a programming portion, but you'd still be seeing these sort of on paper short answer topics. And they cover things like graph theory and Boolean algebra and sort of logical step-by-step thinking, like tracing out a program, and some mathematical ideas. We certainly don't need to run down the whole list, but it's a nice little variety of things that are important to computer science, but don't necessarily have a direct programming application all the time, that could be more theoretical in nature. So starting in junior division, we do have programming, and there's some newer short answer topics. Intermediate and senior division obviously go all the way through the end of high school grade levels, and they're actually very similar to each other. The topics list is exactly the same. It's just that the senior problems are harder. So it's really all very similar from junior through senior. You just kind of look at how well have you been doing in previous years, and possibly what grade level are you in to decide on that. Core Class 4B is certainly getting to the end of the pre-high school curriculum. I would say if you've done well in that, you could absolutely try out junior division USACO, maybe even earlier than that, maybe even as early as Core Class 3B. You could at least check it out, even if maybe your programming skills aren't quite as experienced, that you would be doing as well as later on. And then, intermediate division, I would say once you've taken core class 5A and B, you would probably be definitely in intermediate division, at least if you haven't struggled with that too much. And core class 6A and B, you would absolutely be in senior division. The one exception to some of these things is if you kind of not really looked at ACSL and then burned through all of the programming courses, you might need to do a little catch up on the short answer topics, but frankly, that isn't really a huge impediment to anybody getting started. You could absolutely get into them as soon as you're ready with the overall programming skills. Okay, so here are just some advice points. We do have our prep classes, so please make sure to actually do those. Don't just sort of ignore it and then do it at the last minute. It is a little bit more specialized in this thinking than some of the general programming competitions are. And it's not that it's really hard to learn, but it's something that takes a little time. So if you kind of miss a lot of that and don't do any preparation on your own, it's definitely a little harder to jump into the short answer topics, especially, and even the programming tasks. You should be doing some practice with that. Basic logical thinking skills is pretty important, and just general programming ideas, things like debugging your code, having a plan of what you want to do, knowing what your variables are for to pick a specific programming issue. Those are all things that we certainly see every day in our core programming classes, and they would be coming up during the competition as well. And you have to be maybe a little bit more self-sufficient in these competitions, rather than having the help of student help hours or a teacher in class. So just think about those lessons you've learned and try to work through it start to finish, and that's how you get to be good at these things. Definitely plan your time. It's pretty flexible when to do the ACSL competitions, but if you leave it to the last minute, you can get rushed. You also definitely don't want to try to do it, while you're distracted by other things or have a big project in school. So make sure to plan ahead and, make the most of each of those. The prep classes for ACSL are in a club format, but you would enroll with them at KTBYTE just like other classes if you're on the KTBYTE school team. If your homeschool offers ACSL competition and has a team that you register for, they probably have some kind of computer club at that school that you could practice with. You would not be able to be on the KTBYTE team. But yeah, we have many students whose homeschools don't offer that, and they're joining our weekly meetings of our ACSL club online, just like other KTBYTE classes. All right. The BCC is the probably the other younger level competition that is we're hoping a lot of people are enjoying it. We had several students participate in the past school year. It's once per year in November, as Mark helpfully wrote on the slide. Thank you, Mark. We ran that, and we had maybe about a dozen students participate, I think, and several do quite well. We've also been adding BCC problems to our in-class materials and seen a lot of students do very well with those. So we're really hopeful that we see a lot of people maybe interested in doing this next November, and you can have your name on an honor roll and that kind of thing. It is intended for a younger age group and less experienced students than some of the other competitions. There's no programming portion, but it's definitely pretty fun. There's like a lot of diagrams and things that we'll see in the next few slides, and it's just an interesting thing to do. I would say personally, as someone who really liked logic problems and things like that as a kid, and is now an adult who does all kinds of programming and teaching fairly advanced stuff, I still find these kind of problems fun and interesting. So I think for that alone, it's worth taking a look at. But yeah, these are all multiple choice problems involving various kinds of logical thinking. So let's move on and take a look at this one. So this is basically a graph theory problem in disguise. Now, we don't really need to talk about what that means, but that's a topic you see in a more formal way at higher levels of programming theory and implementation. But basically, we've got a map here, and this beaver is trying to navigate between these trees to get to its home. So basically, we can look at the trees and use them essentially as labels for which way we can go, and just represent the data about this real world task in a way that's in a very programming-like way, where the trees become symbols to represent this concept that's happening, even though we're not literally tracing a line through this map. So let's see if I can figure this one out. So the apple tree could be where we start. But then from there, we can't go to this tree that's directly right next to the house. So that would eliminate choice A. The sort of tall multi-branch tree here, that's not immediately accessible to the beaver, so that eliminates choice B. We could go to the apple tree and then back up here. It seems a little redundant, but it actually looks like C is probably the right answer, where it goes to apple tree, then kind of up the middle, and then over to the house. And then the bottom one does not actually get to the tree next to the house, so that one would be out. So the answer would be C here. So I'm sure everybody here, if you kind of look at the trees hard enough, you can see, oh, right, okay, these are the trees you could pass. So it's just changing the form of how we look at this information, which is really what a lot of computer science is about, looking at ideas and changing the way we're looking at them in a way that helps us figure something out. So that is the skill set there. So with the BCC, you can technically participate at any level. They suggest levels 5 through 6, 7 through 8, and 9 through 10 as the 3 difficulty levels on the competition. But for a lot of our students or other students who just generally like this kind of problem, they might well be able to do several grade levels higher than what's suggested. So probably what you would want to do is just look at some of the example problems, look at the problems from in our KTBYTE classes, and use that to figure out, do you think it's really easy? Or would you think that it's a good difficulty level? But these are things every year you can just kind of pick what level you would do, as long as you're not already above the grade level for that level. Sorry, the grade level for that division of difficulty. And that's how you'd figure it out. So practicing with contests is definitely available. Once you've registered on the website, you can see past problems. And again, we also show students some of these problems in our classes. So like I said, I personally find this kind of thing pretty fun. I think the first one we looked at was maybe on the easier side. It wouldn't be maybe that challenging for some older students, but there's definitely a wide range of problems, and it is fun. You get a chance to see all kinds of different scenarios where you would apply just some logical thinking skills. So before I move on to that, let's check the Q&A. So for the USACO prep classes, we're actually going to get into that a little bit right now. So I'll save that question till after we talk through some of the key points. So 4 contests per year is also the schedule for USACO. And this is a little bit different, though, than ACSL. It is not a cumulative score. Each individual contest is an opportunity to advance. Now, the fact is, regardless of whether it's ACSL or USACO, our best advice is do every contest. If you are interested in this, even if you feel a little nervous about it, or you feel like, oh, I'm not going to do that well, do every one. You never know, you might get lucky, you might be more prepared than you thought, and it's silly to miss a chance to do, to take part, even if it's ACSL, where you might have, let's say, already missed a contest that year and have a lower total score that's possible. But with USACO, you can absolutely get advancement in the USACO difficulty system on any point throughout the year. So try to do every one, and if you miss one, don't let that be an excuse to skip the next one or anything like that. Now, this is a little less flexible in terms of when you do it compared to the ACSL competition, but it's actually still pretty flexible. They have 4 weekends per year that is a contest weekend, and you can pick any basically 4-hour period of time during that weekend where you're going to do your contest attempt. So for instance, if you've got a big project due in school on Monday and you want to focus on that on Sunday, you could do the contest on Saturday. Or if you're out of town at a tournament for something on Saturday, or even all the way through Sunday, you could actually do the USACO competition event on Monday after school. So it's quite flexible. Just make sure to plan ahead and look at our newsletters and the USACO website for the reminders about when the contests are. Now, one quick note about the 4th contest of the year, they're usually labeled by what month they're in. So it's typically December, January, February, and March. But the March contest is not called the March contest. It's called the US Open, as in, you know, after sport competitions and stuff. So it is traditionally maybe a little bit harder than the others, but the fact is the exact format of it is pretty much exactly the same. The one exception might be that it might be an hour longer than the others, but it is just as good an opportunity to get promoted through the difficulty levels as any of the others. So again, we would highly recommend just doing all 4 per year if that's what you're trying to do. So technically, this is also leading up to the International Olympiad, but you really just don't need to worry about that. You can think of each of these as just a nice source for competition problems, where if you do well, you get recognized within their advancement system or an honor roll system in the case of the Canadian competition, and just do your best at it and learn from it. So, and then this is the one that is completely individual. You would not register through a school team. You just do it directly through the website. These are all programming problems, usually 3 to do in about 4 hours. So that means it's about an hour and 20 minutes to completely plan out and solve a programming task and then try to move on to the next one. Now, they have a little bit of a variation in difficulty per problem, and it can be a little subjective. So it could be that you solve one problem in 50 minutes and then another one takes you almost 2 hours. But you use your time wisely. A little bit of contest time management strategy is involved there. Now, there are 4 difficulty divisions we're going to look at in a second. But overall, within all of the divisions, it's been getting harder in the last few years. It's maybe evened out a little bit in like the past year or two, but it's still a little unpredictable. So you might see a problem on one contest that's way easier than you were expecting. And then the next one, you might see the hardest problem you've ever seen in 5 years of problems. So you never know. Just take every chance you can, and you'll find success as long as you keep at it and you keep practicing. So here's the difficulty system. It is bronze through platinum. One misconception that's a nitpick of mine that I really want to dispel is these are not awards you get. This is not you earned gold by doing well or anything like that. These are divisions that you are in, just like in a sports league. You could start in the minor leagues and then do really well and get up into the major leagues. So that is how to think about it. So everybody starts in bronze division automatically, and then if you do well on any bronze level or any bronze contest during the year, you will be promoted to silver division. And then if you do well in your silver division problems, you will be promoted to gold and then finally to platinum. So every one of those 4 events during the year has their own set of problems. So bronze division problems, of course, are a bit easier, silver getting harder, gold harder, and then platinum is basically international Olympiad level problems. It's absolutely very difficult. In fact, it's so few students are really that interested at spending the time required at platinum. We don't actually have a class for that one. That would be something you'd maybe do one-on-one training with a mentor, whereas the other ones, we have a class to prepare for them. So bronze division is certainly much more challenging than any of the other competitions we talked about, but it is something you can get started with, particularly after you finish core 5A and B at KTBYTE. You could get started with bronze. You would still need to really understand it's a big commitment and would be very challenging and need to do a lot of practice, but you could certainly get going with it. Silver is a step up where instead of just general good programming ability and knowledge of some basic programming tasks, there are really very specialized algorithms to learn. By the way, the word algorithm is just a organized systematic plan to solve a task. And so when we say, oh, this program is very cleverly written and it solves this problem in a certain way, we would say that the plan that it followed to solve the problem, that's an algorithm. So there are various specialized plans for certain types of problems that can be solved that we train on in our silver classes, and that you would probably need to know ahead of time to expect to do well in silver division. Gold division has even more complex algorithms and also maybe even building your own data structures. In other words, specialized ways of organizing the data before you even try to fully analyze it and solve the problem. And by the way, the nature of these problems, we don't need to get into all the technical details, but it's basically, you're going to write a program. The program will be run on the competition's computer, so you don't get to run your program yourself. And then they're going to feed data into your program, and your program will have to draw a conclusion about that data. For instance, we saw I'll go back here. We saw this diagram earlier. This could actually be the basis of a programming problem. We could say that maybe the task is they would feed information about a network of roads between locations, and our program would have to figure out, the maximum number of apples we could collect from trees if we consider all these different pathways we could take on the way from where the beaver is to where the house is. That's just off the top of my head a kind of data that we might solve. But of course, it wouldn't be as simple as just 6 different trees. It would probably be hundreds of thousands of trees, and they would input data that our programs would have to figure out from all this data what the correct conclusion is. So that's the kind of problem we would solve here. And yeah, gold division is quite difficult. Platinum is obviously the hardest one. So that's the way it works. Now, like I said, you simply advance to the next difficulty if you do well at an earlier difficulty. So advancement is automatic as long as you keep doing well, and the difficulty never resets. You never go back to bronze division, even if you miss a whole year of contests. You're permanently in the division you get promoted to, which is very nice. It takes the pressure off. You don't need to worry about doing badly and getting demoted or anything. But it also means that you're going to be at that higher difficulty once you get there, which is good. It gives you opportunity to learn more and have fun doing even more challenging tasks. So that was the USACO contest. So the CCC and AIO contests are fairly similar because they're, again, doing that same format with the international Olympiad style problems, but they're only given once per year. CCC given in February and AIO in August. Unfortunately, it's pretty restrictive on exactly the timetable to do this. We had to pick as a school a single time during one day, which happened to be a Wednesday evening, to offer this contest. So we kind of wish it was more more flexible, but we still had a lot of our local students come in. And frankly, even if you couldn't come to the live event, this year, you might be able to organize some kind of proctoring setup with your home school in a future year. And even if you can never do a live event, you still have a lot of practice problems to do to sort of learn about this kind of format. So we hope it'll be more accessible, but it's still a nice format to get used to. The AIO, as far as we know, should be online in August, but we'll keep you posted on anything we find out about that. So the exact format of the problems themselves is very much like USACO. It's just the divisions and the timing is a little bit different. Because these are only given once per year, they give you 5 problems during a contest event. And again, I believe it is 4 hours to do the 5 problems. There's a wider variation of difficulty over these 5 problems. You would tend to start with very easy ones and then have fairly difficult ones. So for instance, I would say in the junior division of the CCC competition that we saw in February, the first one was well below bronze division USACO. It's probably something that almost any core 5A student could have been able to solve. Whereas the hardest one of those might have been one of the harder bronze division problems, maybe even a silver division USACO problem. So there's a little bit of a wider range in what you would do in a single event if it's the CCC. And the AIO, even though we haven't directly participated in that before, it's roughly the same. It's organized to do a whole bunch at a time with a wider range of difficulty. But it's definitely an easier entry point to this kind of work. You don't have to be as skilled before you see some success with the CCC and AIO. So overall, we would just say practice. We certainly have a lot of classes. We have even more classes to get good at USACO and AIO and CCC than we used to. But the fact is, if you are a passive attendee of these classes and you just kind of watch the teacher talk through how things work, you're never really going to get that good on your own. You gotta really push yourself and try to solve things and run into brick walls and stumbling blocks, and then bring that up in class, or learn from a solution that you saw after you tried working from it on your own, because that's how you learn to do better and better personally, rather than just sort of seeing that there is a solution that you've never really taken part in. So practice all the time. Don't get discouraged though. If you are, doing that work, don't expect that you're immediately going to find success. You have to get used to the idea that you're going to try something out and get stuck and have to come back to it and talk about it with someone, or look at another solution and try again and get stuck again, but maybe on something different, and learn from each of those times. So this is absolutely normal, and something that a lot of students maybe get a little discouraged about, but we really want to encourage people not to give up just because they got stuck or didn't have success in the first few tries. So we now have the ability to try lots of different kinds of problems, not just USACO problems all the time. So we hope you take advantage of those things. Even if you can't do a certain specific event, you can do other ones. You can do practice problems. You can do problems in class. You can do them outside of class. You can talk about them with your friends. You can work on them individually. There's all kinds of ways to do these things. So this is just all ways to get in that experience, and then to really try to enjoy it. If you like any kind of puzzle solving, that's really what this is. I personally find this very fun to do, even with I'm feeling stuck with all these things. So some more advanced stuff is, again, being a little bit more proactive. If you really want to get to the highest levels, you have to really see that every solution you're expected to write involves your own creative thinking. There's no way that you can sort of pre-plan or pre-study every possible way to solve a problem. You have to know some general ways to solve a problem, but use your own sort of creative and logical thinking skills to figure out how to take those ideas and apply them to a new problem. So really push yourself to do that. Ask questions in class, make guesses on things that you're doing, rather than just being a passive learner. And also go back to stuff you've seen before. A lot of people maybe finish our classes or say, oh, I went to the website and I solved like every problem from the past 5 years, so I'm done, right? But no, you're not done. You should go back and reuse that material. Try doing it again. Try doing it faster. Try doing it without getting stuck on the thing you did before. Try doing it in a more sophisticated way than you did. So there's lots of depth to what we're doing here that isn't always obvious if you're used to sort of in classroom experiences. So just to update you on some of the changes we've made recently, we did expand our curriculums for USACO style classes, which now includes AIO and CCC, to have a bronze 1 and 2 level and a silver 1 and 2 level. And we highly recommend that for all students. It used to be at a difficulty where students could take maybe 1 semester of training in bronze and then often do pretty well. It doesn't happen anymore. The problems have gotten more difficult. And then we've also obviously been enrolling for these other contests, and we intend to keep exploring those, but we're really looking forward to see students doing more with that going forward. So that includes all the contests we've been discussing. Let's see. So I was thinking maybe we could, I don't know, Mark, should we try to share any pictures? Maybe we don't need to share any pictures from the event we did in February, but it was a lot of fun. And we hope that our local students will continue to do that too. So that's the other big update, is just figuring out how to host this event for the first time with the CCC. Let me just go through the questions people have submitted. For core classes and USACO classes, I recommend thinking of them as complementary. A lot of our students alternate between them. Now, if you're sort of already a junior in high school and you're just getting into USACO and you really want to try to do well at USACO, you can just take USACO classes, but you won't be as well-rounded as others. You never really know when maybe a side idea that isn't usually thought of as a core USACO idea might actually end up being useful. So being as well-rounded as possible is a good idea. A lot of people get a little bit of a tunnel vision on this kind of thing, and I would try to avoid that. I would try to, understand that breadth of knowledge is really good. So core classes and other classes, even things like web development classes and graphics related classes, those will make you an overall better programmer and have you solving more different kinds of problems and make you feel more flexible and independent on USACO. So for Bronze Division, I didn't really mention any specific algorithms. I guess I would say the algorithms there are pretty much the same ones that we see in Core 5A class. It's not so much that there's a specialized algorithm or anything to learn at that level. Now, with that said, we do teach in our classes at that level. We talk about the patterns that we see. We say, well, you guys have learned how to use loops, but have you noticed how a lot of problem-solving tasks, you might set up the loops in this way? And you could call that an algorithm. It's sort of maybe is a subjective opinion of how advanced does a plan of code have to be before you call it an algorithm, but they're certainly on the simpler side, whereas I think you can clearly classify algorithms in silver, gold, and platinum division, whereas at bronze division, it's a little bit more generalized. It's a little bit more like, we have these tools, we practice applying these tools in several ways, we see certain patterns recurring, but it maybe doesn't rise to a classifiable algorithm as much as the others. For debugging, this is actually one of the hardest things to teach in class, because debugging is all about making mistakes and fixing them. So we occasionally do make mistakes in class, and we can talk about how to fix them or how to recognize them. But the fact is, this is where student practice is most important. You got to do your homework and try to do it on your own, because then you get stuck and you learn what kind of mistakes happen and how to recognize them and fix them. And sometimes you might get help from help hours to learn about that. Other times you might figure it out on your own, or you might even not figure it out and have to come into class and ask about it. But that process of getting stuck and thinking about it and figuring it out or asking about it later and following up, that's really how to get good at debugging. So we certainly in our classes will sprinkle in mentions of, oh, for this algorithm, it's easy to make this mistake, that sort of thing. And many of our lectures include that kind of thinking. But the fact is, the best way to get good at it is for it to come up naturally as you practice. There are a few other questions, but I know Mark has been answering a lot of them in text. For USACO classes, in terms of being ready for it, we would usually recommend that you start exploring Bronze Division USACO sometime after Core 5B, which is basically AP level computer science. By the way, I guess if anyone's curious about comparing this to other things like standardized testing, in particular, the advanced placement exam, the USACO is definitely harder than that. Some of the earlier CCC and AIO problems are easier than AP level programming tasks, but a lot of them are harder as well. So overall, this kind of work, it's beyond the level that most high school students get to. Even if you're a fairly high achieving student, getting a 5 on your AP exam, you might still find USACO work pretty challenging. So yeah, core 5B is what we recommend, or possibly even after that. If you're enjoying the core courses, you don't have to get into that right away. But again, a lot of people start to alternate back and forth. For instance, a course sequence a lot of people might do is core 5B, bronze level 1, core 6A, bronze level 2, core 6B, and then silver classes, that kind of thing. But yeah, one thing also look at is how well have you been doing? Have you been doing practice in your classes, or have you been kind of skipping some of the practice? The more you've gotten out of the core classes, the more ready you will be for USACO. And enthusiasm is also important. If you enjoy solving puzzles and stuff, that's good. If you're not really enjoying it and you're really just there to listen to a lecture and then not think about it for a week, you're not really going to get much out of the class. Our next classes will be starting in the summer. We're a little over halfway through the school year right now, so we will definitely have several different summer classes for USACO. Scheduling is always a little difficult in the summer, so if you can't make it to a summer class at the level you'd like to check out, you can also, of course, look at doing that in the fall. And yeah, that's probably the main things about scheduling. Any other questions for now? We're getting towards the end of our hour. I guess we've ended we probably most people have finished the entry poll. Mark, do we have any exit poll you wanted to put up, or
We do.
not?
Thanks for reminding me. I will release that now.
All right. So yeah, please do fill out the exit poll. It helps us let us know what kind of things you're interested in, maybe what kind of things are maybe confusing about this situation or we should be talking more about. But also feel free to send in any further questions in the chat area in Zoom or the question and answer area.
And just a quick follow-up to that question in the chat right now. I will link our silver prep courses pages. We currently have a few scheduled for over the summer. So Yongchang, I'll send that to everyone, but also I'm answering your question that you sent to the hosts.
Let me also mention something about the different difficulty levels, because that's a kind of new thing at KTBYTE within the bronze prep classes and the silver prep classes. Bronze 2 and silver 2 are essentially new courses where we've picked a lot of the harder problems at those difficulty levels to focus on. They're a little bit more freeform in terms of what we cover. We go through problems a little bit more quickly. We focus more on talking through the planning of a lot of problems, but it's also more flexible in terms of what order you do them. So I guess I would say if you've never done USACO at a certain division, it's really important that you do bronze 1 or silver 1 unless you're training more independently. That's going to give you the best introduction to it. Whereas it's not necessarily as essential to immediately take bronze 2 or silver 2 as quickly as possible. It's just sort of an overall opportunity for more practice. So especially if your students are more independent and are sort of willing to practice on their own, we still highly recommend those level 2 courses, but the first level in each division is usually the more difficult one to get used to, so that would be a big priority.
And just a quick reminder, if you haven't yet, please fill out the poll. There is an option at the end to request a consultation call. That can be a great option, whether you're curious about competitions or just learning computer science in general. We'd be happy to follow up with you there.
As people start to think about what their next steps are with these, I want to remind you that there are multiple options. I think in the past, sometimes we made it seem like, oh, there are 2 main things you would do, but a lot of students find it pretty fun to be training on USACO and also take a shot at CCC when they can. And if they're a younger student, also do the BCC and do ACSL like on an ongoing basis. Obviously, that's a lot to handle, but it is pretty fun, especially if you are interested in this kind of thing, and that's where you want to focus your activities in terms of extracurricular work.
And I just answered this in the Q&A, but to follow up real quick, we do send a follow-up email to everyone who registered for the seminar, even if you joined late or had to leave early. you will receive a recording and the slides probably tomorrow once we get it uploaded to the internet and YouTube.
And to answer the question about being out of town, you do not need to be in state to participate. You just need to get to the place where we're giving the contest. Unfortunately, they won't let us give it in too many different places at once. So we had, I believe, one student who actually did extremely well drive up from New York City, I believe. I think that was it, to participate in Lexington. So it's like a 4-hour drive, but they had an excellent score, got on the honor roll. So it can well be worth it. With that said, we're certainly hoping that maybe it might be easier to participate in the future. It was kind of a last minute reveal from the organizers of the contest that, unlike last year, they wouldn't be offering it online and they're going to be a lot more restrictive. So we wish it was easier to participate. One thing that a lot of people didn't have that much time to do for this year's CCC was maybe check in with their home high school or middle school to see if there would be a teacher who could just proctor the contest for them. And we're hoping that if there are students who are interested in that kind of thing, there might be more time next year, now that we know a little bit more about how the setup may be, that you could do that even if you're not doing it through KTBYTE. So definitely encourage looking into that. And as we get closer to next year's contest, maybe towards the end of the fall, this calendar year, we could check in with people who are sort of wondering how to do that and see if we can figure that out.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. If there are no other questions, I'll end the recording there.
I'm glad some of you